Hello, welcome to another episode of Ask the Instructor, where we answer some of your questions that you sent to us on our Instagram. So let's go ahead and
Get started? Okay, so we've got another question on Instagram.
I always get so excited.
This question, so we did a lot of abs in the first episode. The second episode seemed to be legs. The question is scooters. Sometimes it feels awkward, maybe because of my long legs. So let's break that down.
It feels awkward for her to do a scooter.
A scooter, and then she says maybe it's because of her long legs.
Oh, how lucky.
You know, I want long legs too. But maybe you should answer that because you have long legs too.
She might have longer. I don't know what awkward means, but I assume
Maybe I feel like the awkward part will be maybe bringing the carriage back in. Because no matter how long your legs is, pushing away is relatively straightforward.
Yeah, or could it also be when you push away, it hits the
end of the carriage, end of the reformer.
Yeah, another thing that I always tell my clients is you don't have to fully straighten your leg. Because the more important thing is to be able to keep the hips squared, the pelvis stable, and also dependent on your flexibility of your hip flexors as well. So if you can't fully straighten your legs, you don't have to fully straighten your leg.
I think like the fully straightening your leg thing, the carriage leg for scooter, it's a minor thing for the move. So the main point of scooter is your standing leg and your abs and hip flexors on your carriage leg. When you push your carriage legs all the way, it's to just help you work on, like you said, like that hip flexor, opening out, getting to that final bit of hip extension, that final bit of squeeze into that glute. But it's not really very important, especially if you're on a light spring when it comes to scooter. Yeah.
In terms of how to make it less awkward is maybe make the movement a bit smaller if you haven't fully understood the movement yet, or you're quite new to Pilates. Just moving the standing leg forward can give you a little bit more room to push your leg out.
Yeah. If the difficult part's not the pushing away, but it's the coming back, and you feel like because your legs are long, your knee touches the carriage.
Yeah.
So that is a technique issue. So when you come back, you need to hike that pelvis up and keep it hike when you draw it in, which is why on the scooter, on the returns, actually a lower abs and hip flexor thing, because you hike and you keep that engaged to use your abs to draw that carriage back in. So that's the whole part of scooter. So if your knee is sliding against the carriage, you just need to learn to hike that pelvis up and almost suck that hip back into the socket. Yeah.
Suck it up. And also, if balance is the issue, then have your hand on the foot bar to support you with that. Oh, and play with the springs. So if the spring is too heavy, lighten the spring up to help you with your balance.
Yeah, I think a lot of like reformer Pilates nowadays, people have this concept that they have to make the springs hard.
Heavy, yeah.
And like there are some studios that like exclusively have heavy springs, but the problem is
they can't do it correctly.
You can't do it correctly, and like for Pilates, it's not just about strengthening. That's the beauty of it. And like you said, you know, if your springs are lighter, you get to work on like the balance, the stability, and
coordination.
And you have to think about with the reformer, the heavier the spring is, sometimes the more support it's giving you. So the lighter the springs are, actually you're working even harder through those stability muscles and those muscles that help you balance. So have a think about that, and then we will kind of show you the scooter, and then we'll talk about what not to do and how to do it. We're gonna have your standing leg, the outside leg behind that metal foot bar. Now remember, if you're really holding your legs along, take a step forward, that's absolutely fine.
We'll just pretend I have super long legs.
Yeah, so take a step forward.
Legs.
Yeah. And then we're gonna keep your back feet tucked up against that shoulder block, okay? So hands usually are good around the pelvis and waist area to help you find that stability. Pointing hip bones facing forward, let's sink back and down into your squats first. Good. Okay, so this is your starting position for a scooter. Chest stay nice and risen, pelvis stays nice and level, and we're in that hinge position. Now your standing leg doesn't move, you just move that carriage leg. So you exhale, press away, and then you inhale, come back in. So that's what the scooter is and what it looks like. So what you want to work on is as you press away, that your pelvis doesn't rotate up to try to help you go further. So you want to keep that hands on that pelvis nice and level, and then you bend your leg back in. And then when you press out, you only work with how far you can go without this pelvis fully rotating. So making sure that your knee, if it's not straight, it's totally fine, okay? So that's the pushing away part.
Coming down.
The coming back in, you want to think about how to fix it when you come back in and your knee just kind of like slides on that carriage and you feel like it's really uncomfortable and you don't quite know how to fix it. The problem is keeping that pelvis height. So you want to hike that pelvis and really compress into that rib to hip connection to make sure that the opposite pelvis on your carriage leg is higher than this one. So you keep drawing it in, and what I like to think about, when you press away, you hold. When you come back, you dig down on that big toe to drag it in to really engage to that lower abdominals and that hip flexor. And if you're maintaining that height, you're going to feel that your standing glute is going to work way more, which is the entire point of scooter. So if you're letting the knee sag, you're missing out glute on this right side, your standing side as well. So you want to make sure you keep that height. So when you're pulling it in, you want to almost, if you have a mirror in the studio in front of you, that both knees are on the same level. So the one is not lower than the other one. The next question is also legs. This is about squats on the reformer. So when you do squats standing on the reformer, it's part of your standing side split series. And the question is about when I do a squat on the reformer, especially if the spring is light, I struggle to keep the carriage still. It's one of my favorite series to teach.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Especially on a light spring, because like you said, like for scooter, the light springs, it's about that whole balance and like stability. And because the standing side split on light spring is about inner thighs, so then with the squats, you also get like a huge workout on your inner thighs.
Yeah, which is like you can't get that anywhere else.
Exactly. That's why you pay for a reformer class to do a squat.
Yay, so you can feel your inner thighs. Yeah.
Because when you do a squat at home, it's mainly like, you know, glutes and quads, you know. This is why it was one of my favorite series to teach. I love it. How to keep the carriage still. Because you're on a light spring and you're targeting the inner thigh muscle, what a lot of times people do, especially on the reformer, because one feet's on the stable platforms, one feet's on the carriage, we like to put more weight onto your platform leg.
The stable.
Yeah, so you feel more secure. So then what people would do is they would press down on the platform leg, but then on the carriage leg, they tend to kind of press it out towards the risers, like this way. So then your squat gets wider and it gets more unstable and it gets a little bit more like harder. But what I often tell people is instead of pressing away, you press down equally on both heels. And that's the important part. And instead of pressing down, because you're in a squat, your glutes are behind you, people kind of like to kind of propel in that diagonal line to come up because your bum is behind. But instead of that to initiate, you want to push straight down with the heels, so you come up.
Similar concept to doing it on the ground, right?
Yes. But the one that's throwing you off is your light spring and an unstable surface. So you go heels straight down, equal weight. And I think a lot of it is also learning to trust the carriage as well.
Yeah.
You know, and trust yourself that you can put weight straight down onto that carriage and you will be fine.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
The tip that I would give is I find with Pilates, it's all about that control. So make sure that when you pushed out, you're stable first before you start the squat, because I feel like people try to do all of that at the same time, and that's when they can't get the correct weight distribution and when their balance is off. So
like almost hover and hold it there.
Yeah, hold it there, make sure this is correct
Yeah.
before you start going down into a squat.
Yeah.
And same thing, when you come up, really think about digging down into the heels, stand up first, and then go again. Yeah, it's all about that control.
Yeah, so that's about the squats. We're going to show you on the machine, and we'll show you what we mean by by what we often see and how to do it correctly. So this is the standing side split series, the squat standing on that reformer. So one feet's on the stable platform, one feet's on that carriage. So we're going to show you what the squat is on a lighter spring. So you press out slightly, so you have to work on that stability and those inner thighs. You hold that carriage nice and still. You have equal weight on both legs. And then you're going to start your squat then. So you sink your tailbone back, making sure your knees don't go over your toes. Exhale, press down through those heels, come up nice and tall. Carriage stays as still as you can, and then we're gonna show that again. We're gonna sink down, good. And then feel free to stay here for a sec to kind of get that balance, and then only press equally on both heels to come back. Nice, okay, so that's what we want the squats to look like. So often what we see happening is...
I'm gonna try to do like a bad one.
So as you squat down, the knees kind of go wider, yep. And then when they try to come back out, they're like, oh no, they can't control. So they shift towards the right side and then they pull themselves back out, which you don't want to happen. So when you squat down, I know we talked about how pushing up, you want to press down equally. It's the same thing. So when you sink down to the squat, you also want to sink down equally, weight into both legs equally. So when you come up equally as well. Good.
Thank you so much for joining us for our ASA instructors. If you've got any questions that you want answered, leave it in the comments below or go check us out on Instagram and DM us there. We'll see you next time. Bye.